So over the last 10 days, I've played a lot of EA Sports College Football 25. Now, I didn't come on tonight to talk to you about my adventures of playing video games, but what I did want to make this video something that I've learned from College Football 25 is that West Virginia's going to have a pretty good offense. And that's not necessarily to say that I think the defense is going to lack, but if there's anything that I've learned out of playing College Football 25 over the last 10 days, 6, 7 or so games that I've played as West Virginia against other opponents, predominantly from the schedule for 2024, is that West Virginia, for the first time in a very long time, probably going back to before Neil Brown's time, is that West Virginia can be as versatile as perhaps it's ever been. Now, that's what I want to talk about for tonight's video. I know that the fall camp is about to start this upcoming Wednesday, so I think I'll be back earlier this week to talk about what are kind of the things that I'm looking for, things I'm going to be keeping an eye on as we progress and get closer to August 31st against Penn State. So make sure to tune in for that. Love to have you as a subscriber on the channel. If you like this video by the end of it, please smash that like button so more WVU fans can see it across YouTube. So yeah, a lot to talk about in the fall camp. We'll talk about kind of the preseason look and feel of the national top 25, where West Virginia perhaps fits a part of that. What are the expectations for this season? Make some season predictions. A lot of people across YouTube have already started to do that over the course, I feel like, the last months, but I don't think the time is right to do it until August. So for tonight, still just want to talk kind of a baseline feel about this team, at least on paper. So what I have to say about the offense is back to its versatility. Starting, obviously, first and foremost with Garrett Greene. Garrett Greene is going to be the straw that stirs the drink for this team. The little engine that plays much bigger than his probably 5'10", 5'11" stature. He is everything for this offense, and this is his legacy year, I feel like, for West Virginia. I think what he's talked about at Big 12, I almost said Big East, Big 12 Media Day, what he's put out there on social media, working with Quarterback Country, who works with a lot of other college recruits and professionals out there who have gone through the system. It sounds like he's put in a lot of work in the offseason, put a lot into his body, his mechanics, his footwork. That's what really spoke to most during Big 12 Media Days, and I hope that work pays off because when you look at it at the whole, this offense really didn't take off until really Neil Brown let the reins loose, gave him more leash in the second half of that Houston offense, that Houston game, and the offense really took off from there. So it was really, as I've said over our recap of 2023, some of the offseason videos, when we're looking at this 2024 West Virginia offense, we have to look back in 2023 in two parts. Is that when West Virginia in its 6 games, so I'm looking at Penn State, Duquesne, Pitt, Texas Tech, TCU, and even into 3/4 of that Houston game, it seemed as if Neil Brown and the West Virginia offense was just playing more of a, wear the clock down. West Virginia had pretty much a better offensive line than every single opponent that it played last year. So use that road grading line, use Zach Frazier, Wyatt Milam, Doug Nestor with this stable of backs of C.J. Donaldson, Jaheim White, and running Garrett Greene. Control clock, don't turn the ball over. West Virginia was a very good team when you look at it in totality of, Greene only threw 4 picks on the entire season, didn't have any fumble issues like he had back whenever 2021 when he got a few. I can recall the game I went to in 2021 against Oklahoma State. Jarrett Doege struggling. They bring in Garrett Greene for one play. He has a misfumbled snap, loses about 30 yards of field position. It was just ugly. So didn't have anything like that in 2023. But still, through those first 6 games, Neil Brown, and he's even admitted this, was not unleashing Garrett Greene to his full potential, letting him have really I don't want to say free reign of the playbook. That's not necessarily it, but calling games, and the numbers reveal that by the end of the season. And a little nugget that I gave you a few shows ago is that West Virginia had the fewest amount of completed passes by its quarterbacks for a season since 2007 this past fall. So didn't really air it out until it absolutely necessitated it in that game against Houston. And then the offense became a little bit more balanced. And by more balanced, I'm meaning, okay, let's actually air the ball out finally. Getting Devin Carter involved, throwing down more downfield to Cole Taylor, obviously Traylon Ray. So when I look at this year, the number one question, well, let me put a pin in that thought and I'll come back to it for number two. Number one, and this is what everybody would crucify me if I didn't say this, is the health of Garrett Greene. Is the fact that Garrett Greene did not play a full 13 games for the Mountaineers this past year. Yes, his official game stats will say 12, but it was really about 10 and a half. I'm going to count the Pitt game as being out for. I'm going to count, obviously, the Texas Tech game. And he really only played a half against Duquesne. You can recall at end of the second half, that's when Nico Marchiol came in. Yeah, he had some big plays, broke open the scoring out there with Hudson Clement, but then he turned it over to Nico Marchiol for the rest, which you would have expected and wanted to for an FCS opponent. But keeping Garrett Greene healthy is going to be imperative. He cannot take the kinds of walloping hits that he took in the UCF game. If you go back and watch some of those, the film of that game or the Pitt game, he was doing a designed run as a play that he got hit on. Now Garrett's tough, very tough. I think he's in the same vein of, say, a Skylar Howard or a Pat White in terms of rushing ability, is that he can take hits if necessary, but he's got to be smart with it. Obviously doesn't want to leave himself open for any kind of blindside hit or ability in which he cannot protect himself on the hit, whether that's a pass or designed run. So it'll be imperative also for this offensive line to do a great job in pass protection, which I think they can do more so than I have faith in them to be as good of a run blocking offensive line as the offensive line was in 2023. So keeping Garrett Greene absolutely healthy, although I have full confidence in Nico Marchiol with what he's been able to do, that Oklahoma State game in 2022, what he did to win the backyard brawl, to win the Texas Tech game. But again, it was in the first 6 games more of a ground and pound, C.J. Donaldson being the focal point of the offense, not turning the ball over, play great defense, which they did in those 3 games against Pitt, against Texas Tech, against TCU when they really cut their teeth. But it was finally the dam broke. And that's what I mean to say is that West Virginia is going against some high-powered offenses in 2024. And having played them in college football 25, I know, video games to real life, not necessarily the same thing, but it just sheds some light on it, is that Penn State is going to have a high-powered offense, all the way down to Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Kansas State, Arizona, UCF. I mean, right there, that's 6 offenses that West Virginia is going to have to score on the aggregate as much as it did in 2023 as it did in 2024 by the end of the year. Now, they were a national top 25 scoring offense, but I think you're going to have to put up even more points than you did a year ago. So, you look, again, those first 6 games, what they average versus the back half where they're averaging into the 30s. That's where I think you need to be, if not better. You can't. It doesn't matter necessarily at the end of the day. If a win is a win is a win. If they beat Penn State 3-2, but you would still like to see a West Virginia offense play up to its potential consistently, and not have any sort of games where it has to necessarily go into a shell of itself like it did against Pitt whenever Garrett Greene was out. So health plays a major part of that. So second of all, I think we have to see and I know this has been talked ad nauseum during the offseason, but I talked about it especially after the Oklahoma State game or the Oklahoma game in 2023, and it's that mid, especially off when he's playing from the pocket, type of short to intermediate passes for Garrett Greene. He likes to roll out. I get it. He likes to throw on the run. He likes to throw downfield, especially from the pocket. And because of his stature, with how big the offensive line is in front of him, throwing short crossing patterns over the middle of the field, your ins, your slants, your posts, so on and so forth. Like he would rather throw those types of passes when he's on the move, especially out of an RPO if he can move laterally. So that's what Oklahoma did to West Virginia. They made Garrett Greene pass from the pocket, rushing the ends. So there's enough film now on Garrett Greene in this West Virginia offense to show that if you rush the ends and force Garrett Greene to have to beat you from within the pocket, if West Virginia continues to air it out deep, go with this air raid type of offense of throwing the ball deep, this is new territory, I feel like, for Neal Brown. It's something that he's always wanted to do, and the analytics have pointed to over the last year to running the ball consistently, succeeding in the running game, and airing the ball deep. But now you have a senior Cole Taylor who Garrett Greene really developed some good rapport with in 2023. Hudson Clement, especially when he was healthy toward the end of the season. I can think back to that Baylor game. I can think back to the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Really seemed to develop that kind of Greer to Sills-like rapport with Hudson Clement. Now, where the versatility and where I want to see what happens in 2024 really comes with the four receivers in how do you use, is Jaden Bray your true number one if you don't trust Traylon Ray? And I think by the move of going to Justin Robinson and bringing him in as a late transfer add, looking at him especially in the red zone, but perhaps that kind of deep threat, a big-bodied guy can go win in jump ball situations, kind of like how West Virginia used Devin Carter this past year. Or does Bray fill that role? So Ray, and then Preston Fox had his best year as a Mountaineer this past year. Really was one of I feel like the unsung heroes of the offense at times, just coming up with big play when you needed it, after big play after you needed it. And then if you looked at his speed in college football 25, Rick Darius Farmer, Day Farmer as his nickname goes, is arguably the fastest man on the field for West Virginia. So very curious to see how he gets involved. Obviously, I've been talking about Rodney Gallagher. I feel like all offseason, I still feel as if he's going to have to beat out Preston Fox for that slot position. But if he can potentially break in on special teams first, use his speed out of still the more lateral runs, quick outs, things like that, he can start to develop some consistency, get some momentum going. And you never know what's going to happen with injuries. But as your pass catching, your receivers and tight ends, West Virginia can be very multiple. You have your slot guys, your small, shifty kind of guys who can make plays out in space. From as old as a senior in Preston Fox down to a freshman in Rick Darius Farmer. On the outsides, you have some playmakers, I feel like, in Bray, Ray, and now Robinson. And then in the middle of the field, I think one of the more unsung heroes of 2023, or at least going into this 2024 outlook at the tight end position, I think, and one of the best in the conference in Cole Taylor. So, talked about quarterbacks, talked about pass catchers. Let's talk about the running backs. And this was a historic past season for the West Virginia ground game, who has had some great running backs over the last, especially of my lifetime, I feel like. Thinking about Avon Coburn, thinking about Steve Slayton, Noel Devine, Wendell Smallwood. Then, toward the later stages of Dana Holgorsen kind of did it by committee. Then Letty Brown really emerged at the early portion of 2020 and then into 2021, definitely for sure. Now it's the triumvirate of Garrett Greene at quarterback, C.J. Donaldson at running back, and Jaheim White also at running back. Now, I'm not going to be one of these people like Mike Ostie from West Virginia Sports Now, who said that there is pressure on C.J. Donaldson to perform in 2024. But obviously, he has Jaheim White looking over his shoulder, and that is one of the benefits of this West Virginia offense is it can be very multiple. I hope that we can see, I mean, I've prayed for this for so long, multiple back sets with perhaps Jaheim White on one side, C.J. Donaldson on the other side, and Greene in the middle, in the similar way that West Virginia used Noel Devine, Steve Slayton, and Owen Schmidt, even though with Pat White, so that was four. But C.J. Donaldson being the thunder to Jaheim White's lightning, I think with White, especially in the back half of the season, he had fresh legs. He did not play very much through those first 6 games when C.J. Donaldson was the Warhammer. West Virginia does not beat Pitt in the backyard brawl without C.J. Donaldson. Let me repeat that for people like Mike Ostie. C.J. Donaldson won West Virginia the backyard brawl in the way that he was able to tote the rock for 4 quarters and being keyed upon like he was against Penn State, like he was against Texas Tech, and definitely TCU. Also into the first half of Houston, he was the focal point. Now, could he have been better with the way that he read the zone blocking holes, hitting the holes with... Yes. Sometimes C.J. Donaldson needs to take the Letty Brown approach and run through people rather than run around them trying to make the big play. But how many times has he saved West Virginia in short yardage situations? I can think back to maybe my most obvious case in point when West Virginia came out with a heavy set. It was like a goal line on either the far side 40 of UCF or the near side 40, and boom, he breaks off for like a 20-some yard run. So that's what C.J. Donaldson can do for you. He can give you those, consistent 4, 5, 6 on first down that you need to set up second and short, third and short situations, but he can also be your short yardage back. Great pass blocker. And also, I think he's an underrated pass catcher, that West Virginia can get involved more into the passing game, but there are just so many different mouths to feed, and West Virginia didn't throw the ball very much in 2023. So there is untapped potential. I think that the management of carries between the 3 backs, and I'll include Greene as part of that at quarterback, the management, and you want to call it volume or pitch count or load management, to use an NBA term, will be fascinating. I think that depending upon game flow, game script, what's working, to just continue to read the whoa, I'm losing it here. Ride the hot hand. Read how the game flow is going, and don't get anybody injured. If you watched that Baylor game back, there were times where Jaheim White would take a carry on first down. He'd take a carry on second down. Giving it to him a third time in a row on a series in a short yardage situations. If you do that, you can't go back to him again, probably for the next succession of a few plays, to give him a bit of a breather. Jalen Anderson, for as much hype as he's got here and there and some media coverage, really was outside of the Pitt game where he did get, I think, double-digit carries. There was a reason why West Virginia was trying out DJ Oliver in the Duke's Mayo Bowl for some of those short yardage situations. You could have thought if maybe a DJ Oliver could have emerged as more of that backup type to C.J. Donaldson with a complemented, similar body frame, that maybe he could take those carries by Jalen Anderson to the transfer portal. But when Oliver left, you need that third back. Hopefully Anderson can give you more, because 2023 was a bit of a wasted season, I feel like, for him. The fumble against UCF on kind of the trick play with Nico Marchiol. Of course, the interception that fell out of his hands in the Houston game. Jalen Anderson needs to have a bounce back year if he wants to make 2025 a transfer portal type year with another program as a starting back. So, gotta contribute somewhere. So, the management of carries to keep White fresh, to keep Donaldson fresh, while trying to feed Donaldson enough that, perhaps toward the end of the season, if he performs well, if he has a Taj Brooks-like year as Texas Tech this past year, over 1,000 yards, double-digit touchdowns, can prove it to the NFL scouts that he could be a type of starting caliber back, that maybe if he has heights and aspirations of going to the NFL, that this is the year to prove it. If he can get close to 20 carries, I don't think he necessarily needs to average 20 carries. Like a 240, that's a lot. Even 210, I feel like that's a lot. But it's all going to be really dependent upon that game flow. But at the end of the day, he's got to average, I feel like, at least 15, 16 carries, which is about what he did this past year. Get over 1,000 yards, hit those holes, show the big playability that made him a nationwide sensation in the backyard brawl of 2022. And Jaheim White, I think, is just your Swiss Army knife. If you're going to use him in receiving situations, if you're going to use his speed, utilize him on special teams, I feel like he hits the outside hole as fast as any running back that I've seen since, Noel Devine, or we were watching Tavon Austin against Oklahoma. He gets to the outside so fast, and that's what C.J. Donaldson necessarily can't give you. He can give you between the tackles. He can give you Le'Veon Bell, read the offensive line, wait for it, see it go, and get you somewhere, close to 10 yards every single time he touches the ball. But, to just go off an outside zone read, and he's hitting the outside shoulder of Wyatt Milam, or the outside shoulder of Nick Malone the opposite way, that, you got to get all three of those things involved. I think we'll see more out of pass plays in which Garrett Greene runs in 2024 than we did in 2023, unless or fewer designed runs potentially. Because if you watch that spring game, and I know it's just a spring game, so how much credence can you put into a spring game? Greene was itching to run. And what I'll have to say is I always say you lead with your strengths. Do not go against your strengths if that's what you feel like is your best mode of attack. And he's going to want to run the ball. If this is his last year in college football, maybe the last time. If he gets to I don't know if it at his size, doesn't matter how if he's the reincarnation of Johnny Manziel out there, okay, maybe. But the potential of going to the NFL, I feel like are on the outsides looking in, at least at this point in time. But so if this is his last year of college football, maybe he plays the USFL or Canada or something out there after, if the NFL doesn't necessarily work out. That he's going to put on a show. He's going to want to, play some hero ball, and I'm all for it. I feel like as a West Virginia fan this year that we have to ride or die, live and die with how Garrett Greene does this year. And those decisions in his mind to tuck it and run are going to be, I feel like, make or break the difference in a game or two this season, no matter how good West Virginia plays. Because West Virginia is going to have to fight fire with a lot of these offenses this year. I know I was very critical of the spring, and it wasn't really until I played a lot of this college football 25 about West Virginia trying to, especially once the rumor was that Corey McIntyre tore his ACL in spring camp before the spring game, so West Virginia was going to be down another defensive lineman. Now you're looking at Fatorma Mulba at defensive tackle, Hammond Russell, who's played sparingly, and now they've just converted Mo Hamilton from the offensive line to defensive line. Good call, in my opinion, having played nose guard in high school. He's over 300 pounds. Get him out there. I love 300-plus pound linemen. Throw him out there. Give him a shot. So West Virginia could have stacked up on this defensive line, could have went for another, outside linebacker, I feel like, to back up on one side or another, maybe a younger guy that maybe not have seen snaps, but if it gets down to a Benon Wuka playing significant snaps, because you got Tyron Bradley, you got Ty French. On the opposite side, they're trying some things out between Ben Cutter and Josiah Trotter, so I like their 6. And that's why, at only 6, that Jordan Leslie and Neil Brown don't feel comfortable enough to go to a 3-4 defense. So putting in their last stock into Greg Genros at tight end, Their last few scholarships, him, Ryder Burton as an insurance policy, third quarterback in case both Nico Marchiol and Garrett Greene suffer an injury. And then, of course, adding Robinson as a body type that West Virginia didn't necessarily have on its roster. So you want to have that for versatility reasons. So West Virginia is going counter to what Neal Brown spoke to, preached in 2019 and 2020 when he first got hired, thinking that there was a grand opportunity for a defensive program in this conference to really, take the reins and compete up there with a Texas and an Oklahoma. So instead, putting all of the emphasis into the offense and hoping that this program can score. The 2018 West Virginia team averaged 40 points per game. Can West Virginia do that? It definitely has the versatility, I feel like, in the same vein. Maybe not as strong at wide receiver, obviously, as a David Sills or a Gary Jennings. Trevon Wesco, Cole Taylor might be a push. I think I'd give the edge to this offensive line versus that offensive line. And then obviously the stable of backs with the mobile option in Greene as opposed to a 2018 Will Grier. I think that this offense can be right up there, the best that we've seen since that 2018 team. So if West Virginia can score 35 points or more for a season, there is a very good I looked at the stats from all of the programs who were the national leaders in scoring points per game. And if you were up there in the top, 20, just like West Virginia was right on the outside, you won 8 games or more. So if they can do that, I know that's like easier said than done, and I'm kind of putting it simply. But yes, West Virginia on the season last year was tied for 38th in the country in scoring at 31.5 points per game. Looking at some of the teams ahead of them, they were all teams that played in pretty good bowl games or better, or obviously were conference champions, or played in the college football playoff, so on and so forth. If they get up to 40 points per game, and that's going to be tough against some of these defenses. I think about Penn State. Pitt is going to throw everything in the kitchen sink at West Virginia at Acrisure Stadium September 14th. Even though that's a 3-9 program coming back this year, you've seen some of these games over the years with Pitt. The crazy stuff happens, and I trust their defense more than I do their offense. Oklahoma State's got a good defense coming back. Kansas State's got a good defense coming back. I think there's some potential there with Iowa State. I think Arizona has some nice pieces here and there. So I don't know right now on July 29th, am I bullish enough to say that West Virginia is going to average 40.1, which is 5-1 of last year's total scoring was Georgia at 40 points per game. But if they can improve, 8.5 points per game, given the way the first 6 games went, again, scoring 15 against Penn State, only scoring 17 against Pitt, 27 against Texas Tech, and then what was it against TCU? 24 against 20 points against Texas Tech, and then 24 against TCU. Those were some games that they didn't get over the 30-point per game threshold. So if they can continue what they were doing, now again, it's going to be against tougher opponents, that this will be a very successful team. This will be a team that you'll want to go see every single time that they're at Milan Puskar Stadium, and potentially even travel on the road. Because now I'm 28 minutes in here about this offensive line. I still think that it's going to be Nick Malone at right tackle. I think that's going to kind of be, not to already give away what I'm going to talk about coming into fall camp, but one of my points I've talked about during the off season, especially during spring camp and the spring game, was what's going to happen at right tackle. I still think it's Nick Malone's position to lose 90% or more. I have a feeling that he'll be the starter come week 1 against Penn State. Then we kind of know that front 5. And I love where this 2 deep is. I think that Matt Moore and Neil Brown have done a tremendous job over the course of the last 3 seasons, from when that, guaranteed late bowl at 2 in the morning against Minnesota and Phoenix, going back to the drawing board, thankfully getting into the older years of Zach Frazier and Doug Nestor, adding on Wyatt Milam, and then what they were able to do with that 2022 recruiting class, get some guys, and 23 as well, some guys who are going to be starting, because pretty much the whole line, especially if Remack goes pro, which who knows, it might be a stretch still, but may be replacing the entire offensive line come for next season. But these are guys who I feel like are just waiting in the wings and can even push on the door of some of these, upperclassmen starters. I'm not talking about a Johnny Williams pushing out a Wyatt Milam, or even necessarily Nick Cray pushing out Tomas Remack. But Landon Livingston, especially now with Kyle Altuner apparently, unfortunately, out for the entire season, a lot of onus is going to put on Landon Livingston if Brandon Yates, and it's just so unfair to say this, but if there is a noticeable drop-off, either in rushing, snapping, pass protection, we're going to notice it first, I feel like, with Brandon Yates, which is unfair given that he is following arguably the best center in program history. Frazier right up there with Dan Moses. 1A, 1B, or it's a tight between the two of them. So what are fans going to call on first, if not necessarily, let's see what Landon Livingston can do? And then, Jaquay Hubbard being a 6th-year guy, and then, of course, Bosley and Malone at that battle at right tackle. So can they get the same push up front in the run game that the 2023 offensive line did? I don't know. If that's not the case, it's okay, but can this offense diversify to play to this team's strengths? And can Greene reciprocate with a more of a short to intermediate passing game? Because you got all these receivers who are just, I swear, their mouths are watering at the idea of targets. That when you're looking at last year's stats, I'm sure that's why the national and Big 12 media are like, about West Virginia, because they're looking at the numbers and they're looking at the receiving core. When you compare, say, an Iowa State with Noel and Higgins, and you look at West Virginia's top 2 pass catchers, and you're just like, no way. Or look at Arizona with McMillan, or I guess Penn State's not the greatest example. Keandre Lambert-Smith left, but you get where I'm going with this. Or some of the other offenses around college football, especially in the SEC, or even Big Ten, that there are some dynamic quarterback to wide receiver duos. So can Greene develop? Is it going to be with Jaden Bray? Will he continue that same kind of rapport with Hudson Clement? I think definitely. I don't know necessarily. I'm not as bullish now on Traylon Ray as I was, say, just a few months ago because of the addition of Justin Robinson and how they use them. I still think the first place for Rodney Gallagher to break out potentially is on special teams. But Taylor, Clement, Bray might be your top 3 pass catchers. And then there's still going to be a whole lot of running the ball. So I'm very excited to see this West Virginia offense just playing with Greene on College Football 25. I'm super mad that Cole Taylor isn't in the game. So that's a bummer. But I like what I've been able to do with this offensive line, like being able to throw the ball to some of these guys. And you have arguably the best number 2 backup quarterback in college football, I feel like, in Nico Marchiol, who's also, any given play, due to injury potentially, and it's Nico Marchiol sliding in for Garrett Greene. So love what I've seen out of this offense. In a video game, I still like what West Virginia has on paper comparatively against the Big 12. Pound for pound, position for position, across the Big 12 offenses, and even nationally. You look at some of these teams that are going to get a lot of preseason hype, even like a team like Penn State, that if you go position by position, yeah, you might give some edges here and there to Penn State, but I think West Virginia can, if it continues the momentum it had from 2023, and that's something that I've talked about since the season ended, is to continue to build upon it. Neil Brown was more aggressive and ever before, going for it on fourth down this past season. Love that. They were stout in special teams, nothing to hold them back from that, but he was aggressive to try and, was not going to pull any sort of backyard brawl 2022s again in 2023. Is he was going to ride and die with this offense to figure it out. How versatile they were, and also the play calling was better. The play calling, and that might just be an effect of delegating those GM NIL responsibilities to Drew Fabianich, to Rasheed Marshall, director of player personnel, some of those things, and he could really just coach ball. That he could draw up some plays. Now, continue to be more creative. Like the stick and nod type of play action pass that they used against Houston to Traylon Ray. One of my favorite calls of the entire season. Great call, great execution. This is going to be on Neil Brown and Chad Scott to be able to manage those carries between the three backs, Greene, Donaldson, and Jaheim White. Who's going to emerge out of these pass catchers? It's this kind of the same question that we had going into 2023, but we had to suffer through Cortez Bram, Jeremiah Aaron for the first few weeks. Now, with all these receivers, insert Bray, insert Robinson, yes, but Bray had an entire spring camp into the summer to throw with Greene, and I think Robinson will be brought along slowly. Farmer going to be, I would think, not necessarily seeing starting reps, but might see some plays in the back half of the season here and there sporadically, kind of dependent upon what happens, I feel like, with Rodney Gallagher. Or there are other freshmen, maybe a Brandon Raymond who gets included depending upon how the fall camp goes. So I like how versatile that the dynamics that can happen with this offense this season, be able to plug and play in different scenarios. You can go heavy, you can go light, you can run the ball, you can use play action, RPO. It's just going to have to be, I feel like, an added emphasis. If Greene is going to want to achieve this goal that he set for himself at Big 12 Media Day of a 65% completion percentage or higher, it's going to have to mean that West Virginia airs the ball out in short to mid yardage situations. I think there was great rapport between Greene and Devin Carter on, say, that out route. It was an RPO kind of roll out to the sideline. More of that. Using Preston Fox in the slot, even more downfield situations. Love that. So you can kind of play with that. So the onus is going to be on Neil Brown to dial, and that's probably, arguably, I feel like, as a coach, the hardest coaching job in sports is a football play caller. Baseball manager, an NBA coach, soccer coach, hockey coach, it's all on the players. As the coach, as the offensive coordinator, play caller, you dictate whether your team wins or loses by what you call in different situations. And I think more times than not, I was very happy of the play, for lack of a better term there. I was just happy with a lot more of the play calling in 2023 than past seasons. Was that because Neil Brown was able to put more emphasis on drawing up more plays, installing, and had some upper class players who had been through the system a few years and been able to do it? Well, for 6 weeks against 6 opponents, no, it seemed like not. With a turnover at the wide receiver position, again, not giving full control of the offense to Greene, C.J. Donaldson, not getting Jaheim White is incorporated into the two-headed monster at running back with C.J. Donaldson as soon as he should have. So I think some of those things will change. And there are just more weapons to fire for Neil Brown than ever before at West Virginia. So there are not a lot of excuses left. These are all his recruited players. These are all transfer portal recruits that he and his staff have had a hand in playing and bringing them into this program. So it's up to these coaches now to bring it all together. You have all these ingredients, make the best pizza you possibly can. And I think there are some really good ones. I really think this offensive line is going to still be up to snuff. You have one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12 and in the country, a bunch of versatile different type of pass catchers, and still two really good running backs. So you're going to have to fight fire with fire in this Big 12 conference, but it's going to mean a lot of fun for us fans. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'll be back later this week, maybe even tomorrow, to talk about the 5 things that I'm looking forward to most watching in fall camp as we dial it up almost 1 month away from the Penn State game. So thanks for tuning in. Hail West Virginia, and let's go Mountaineers.